49,000. Let that number sit for a second. 49,000 Chinese electric vehicles, every single year, heading north into Canada. And the man who spent 2 years telling the world that China was the single biggest economic threat to North America, he got caught on a hot mic saying he likes it. But here's what nobody is leading with. This isn't a car story. This isn't even really a trade story. What you're watching right now is Canada quietly positioning itself as the negotiating bridge between the two most powerful economies on Earth. And it happened in plain sight while Washington was looking the other way. Stay with me, because by the end of this, you're going to see exactly what Carney just pulled off and why it matters to every single Canadian watching from this side of the border. Let's go back to January of this year. Donald Trump went on social media and posted one of the most direct warnings he had issued to Canada in the entire trade war. His exact words: "China is taking over the once great country of Canada." Not a subtle message, not diplomatic language, a direct public warning to Ottawa. Stop getting close to Beijing or face the consequences. Most countries would have heard that and backed off. Most countries would have read the room, quietly shelved whatever conversations were happening with China, and waited for the temperature to drop. Canada did the opposite. Within weeks, Mark Carney's government finalized a deal with China that partially rolled back Canada's 100% tariff on Chinese electric vehicles. In exchange, China suspended its retaliatory tariffs on Canadian agricultural goods, farm exports, the kind of deal that puts real money back into the pockets of Canadian farmers who had been absorbing the cost of that trade war for months. And then Canada put a hard cap on it: 49,000 Chinese EVs per year, less than 3% of the Canadian market. Not a flood, not an open door, a controlled, calculated number with a ceiling. Trump had warned Canada about China, and Canada responded by making a deal with China that actually had a structure Trump's own trade instincts could respect. Now here's where the story gets remarkable. Fast forward to the G7 summit in France. The leaders of the world's 7 largest economies are sitting around a table, and at some point during a roundtable session, Mark Carney leans over toward Donald Trump, quietly, calmly, and walks him through the deal. The hot mic catches everything. Carney's voice, explaining the structure. Less than 3% of our market. 49,000 cars. It's a cap, a hard line. And then the line that tells you exactly how well Carney read the room. "I thought you'd actually like that." Trump nods. "That's good. I like it." 4 words. Caught on a microphone in front of the entire world. And just like that, the man who spent 2 years calling China the enemy of North America publicly endorsed Canada's approach to handling Chinese EVs. Now let's be precise here because this matters. Trump's own administration is furious about this deal. Senior officials inside Washington remain vehemently opposed to anything that gives Chinese automakers a foothold near the American market. A United States senator called Chinese cars a cancer and introduced legislation for a permanent ban. 2 Michigan Democrats introduced a bill to block Chinese vehicles on national security grounds over data concerns. So Trump's government hates the deal. And Trump himself, sitting next to Carney, said he likes it. That is the contradiction at the center of this story. And it tells you something important about where the leverage actually sits right now. Here's the chain. And I want you to follow it carefully, because this is where it stops being about cars entirely. Trump applies tariffs on Chinese goods to protect American manufacturing. Canada watches. Canada still has its own 100% tariff on Chinese EVs from the previous government. But Canada also has farmers who are being crushed by Chinese retaliatory tariffs on agricultural exports. So Canada makes a calculation. What if we use the Chinese EV question not as a wall, but as a bargaining chip? The deal Canada strikes is precise: 49,000 vehicles per year at a reduced tariff rate. Hard cap. In return, China lifts retaliatory tariffs on Canadian canola, pork, seafood. Canadian farmers start breathing again. But here's the layer underneath that. Carney then tells reporters something that should have made far bigger headlines than it did. The deal, in his words, creates the possibility that this commercial relationship develops and there is Chinese investment in Canada, And then he clarified exactly what he meant: material Canadian production. Chinese brands building cars on Canadian soil. Read that again slowly. Chinese automakers building vehicles in Canada. Now, I want to give you the honest counter-argument because it matters. The Canadian Vehicle Manufacturers Association, which represents Ford, General Motors, and Stellantis operations in Canada, is pushing Ottawa hard to kill this deal. Their concern is real, and it deserves to be heard. If Chinese brands establish a production foothold in Canada, they are one step closer to the North American market. And the North American auto industry, which is already dealing with factory cuts and union uncertainty, does not need that pressure right now. General Motors just cut Canadian production. Stellantis has been scaling back. Ford is in active restructuring. These are not abstract fears. There are real Canadian jobs attached to real assembly lines that are already under pressure. And the idea of Chinese brands eventually competing from inside the country adds a layer of complexity that the industry is not ready for. That is the legitimate tension here, and Carney's government is going to have to navigate it carefully. But here is what I keep coming back to, and this is the part that most coverage is missing entirely. Canada just did something no other American ally has managed to do in this entire trade war. It made a structured deal with China. It defended that deal publicly. It explained it calmly to Trump's face at the G7. And it got Trump on a hot mic saying he likes the structure. That is not luck. That is positioning. While Washington has spent 2 years treating China as purely an adversary and treating Canada as a pressure point, Canada has quietly placed itself in the middle, not choosing sides, not folding to either Washington or Beijing, using the space between them to extract real economic value for Canadian farmers, create the possibility of real investment in Canadian manufacturing, and demonstrate to both superpowers that Canada has options. This is exactly the Carney playbook you have seen on this channel before. Don't escalate emotionally. Don't accept the framing you're handed. Find the structural leverage and let the other side's contradictions do the work. Trump warned Canada about China in January. By June, Carney was sitting next to Trump at the G7 explaining a China deal. And Trump said he likes it. 49,000 EVs heading north is the headline. But the real story is the country that turned a warning into a negotiating position and quietly made itself impossible to ignore. So here is my question to you. Is Canada threading a needle here, using China as leverage to protect farmers and attract investment while keeping the deal small enough not to threaten the auto sector? Or is this a door that once opened cannot be controlled because I have laid out the chain? I have shown you the deal, the hot mic, the contradiction, and the stakes. And on this one, I genuinely want to know where you land. The decisions are being made.